Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to my third episode of my Dev Diary. This will be the episode where I build at least some UI and the third most important aspect of my game, which is the internal construction mechanic. Alright, so we've jumped into it now. You guys will probably notice that I'm not talking from my camera anymore. I realize that by speeding up everything, it just makes shit a lot funnier. At least for me. I don't know. Anyway, it also allows me to condense everything. What you're watching is effectively 7 hours worth of work condensed into just under 40 minutes. So it helps. Alrighty. So, what I've started to do here is I've started to make these things called canvases, right? And canvases are your user interface layouts that go just in front of the camera. It's got your buttons, your health bars, and all that jazz. So that's what I'm building here at the moment. And what I'm doing is I'm making like an organic or like an empty template, and then I've copied it many times, and then I've renamed one called the HUD, and I've started editing the HUD. This is me just placing the buttons around for the HUD. Now the HUD is going to be the main UI that every player is going to see when they open up the game, or at least are in the game. And these are going to, I'm going to try and make it that all these user interfaces I build are going to be as minimalistic as possible when it comes to use buttons and health bars and stuff. Because I found that when it comes to mobile games, you don't actually want that much stuff. Now I'm just giving some of the buttons a picture or two. You'll notice that this is some assets from Fallout Shelter. I'm using them temporarily until I'm able to get my own assets. I hope that's not a bad thing. I hope that's allowed. And yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so here we are coding the UI manager, building some stuff, going for it. Just saying that, listen, you have a game object called the current canvas, which will be the current canvas at any one time. If the current canvas is null, if there's nothing in it, you've got to spawn in the HUD, which is also, by the way, short for heads up display. That way, there'll always be a default user interface no matter what happens. So yeah. Okay, so here I'm making some methods as well. Gotta get some of those methods in. What am I doing? Oh, yes, I'm creating a change to method. This method will just allow me to change the UI whenever I need it. So whenever something happens in the game, the UI needs to change into, say, a different, like an in-game menu or something. That's what that method does. So yeah, and here we are programming the HUD itself, putting out some listeners for its little buttons that I've mentioned at the top there in a very unique, cool way. And what else? What am I doing? Oh yeah, so this is just telling that the Alt button is the focus button. So before I just had it where you double clicked on something and that became the object of focus, but I had plans for that for another thing. So what I'm doing is I'm building a button instead that will allow you to, if you want, you can look at it by clicking on this button. And later on I'll code that that button also only is visible if the selected object is not full or full or something. I don't know. I did this like a week ago. But yeah. Anyway, onwards. Onwards. Jesus, look at me in the mirror. I mean, in the camera. It's so weird watching myself in the camera at hyperspeed. If you guys are observant enough, you will notice I have little freakouts and moments here where my code decides to work, or I do something in one go and it works out just well. And if you're quick enough, you'll notice I have a bit of a moment. Precious few moments. Anyway. Alright, now what am I doing? Looks like I am telling the player that if selected object is something, then do something. Oh yeah. I'm just messing around with the camera now, getting some things tweaked out. Funny thing is, even though this is about 7 hours of work, 4 hours of it is me making mistakes and not figuring them out until like half an hour later and rectifying my own mistakes. But hey, I'm human, and I'm leaving those in this video so that it humanizes me as a developer, because a lot of people seem to think that developers are super smart and they're unable to make mistakes. It's like, yeah, we do. Those YouTube videos you see of developers doing everything in a single go, that's bullshit. That person spent like several hours or minutes building that, and then they just edited it later so it looked like they were doing it all in one go. I kind of messed around with that option in the first two videos. But no, now that I can speed everything up, I'm going to leave my mistakes in here so people can see. Also, a large amount of this is me fighting with my OCD, because online naming conventions, the way things are presented, clean code, all that kind of stuff. Woo! A lot of OCD, but that's fine. OCD just makes me more organized. Okay. All right, I kind of lost track of what I'm doing here. Okay, let's focus on the video. I think I'm just messing around with cameras and selecting at the moment. All right, I'm trying to get the UI going. Okay, so what I've done is I've programmed that the primary button, that little console on the bottom right, when it's clicked, what it does is it makes the ship the object of focus, and if it is already the object of focus, what it's going to do is it's going to activate the internal view, and I've made a toggle view methods in the player script. So IVA, you'll see it a lot from soon. IVA stands for internal view activated. And I'm just getting the alt doing. Alright, this is me just messing around, making sure that the whole select focus on button works. Should have been a video all unto itself, but really I just decided to put it all in. So yeah. Oh, look at that. My environment just changed. You can tell. Okay, so this is me just in Blender. I'm messing around with the game object that is my spaceship and saving it into my Unity files. Because I wanted to give it a different material that's different to that of the facilities that are going to be going in there, so that you can more easily see that they are there. Otherwise, they'll just blend in and it'll be all different shades. Well, they'll all be the same shade of white, which will make it difficult to see. What else? Okay, so this is just me. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm telling the ship that it's got this game object called a cross section, which is half the ship. And when the internal view is activated, that half that ship, this cross section here, its set active is false, which means it'll disappear, it'll go invisible, and not be an active game object, which allows for effectively that illusion of the ship splitting in half, which is great. I'm just modding it here because I realized the trails will seem to stick and stay as well, which is not good. You want them all to disappear. And then here we go. Nailed it. Okay, what else? Come on. Okay, so now I've decided to pull in my CIC, which stands for Combat Information Center. And I'm just messing around with its scale here, trying to figure out where the most optimal scale is. And you can see here that I've again gone for the make it a child of an empty parent game object, because it just helps a lot with scaling issues, because then you can just edit the parent and that makes it easier. So now I'm just making a template. I'm just getting a few measurements done, because when these rooms are spawning in next to each other, I need to know the exact measurements of how far they're apart, which in this case is 2.6 on the z-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create game objects called sides and place them in the prefab or in this game object, so that when it comes to searching to put the constructors, they'll find all the sides and then spawn the constructors there, which when the constructors are selected, they will spawn the new room. Now you're probably asking me, if you're a developer, why don't you just use raycast at this point and or just pure coding math? And the thing is, Oh wow, sorry, my mic just cut out. Okay, so the thing is, when it comes to Unity and a parent game object in that case, raycasts and maths when it comes to measurement actually don't. They kind of just weirdly stick to the global axes, which means everything becomes really unaligned when you make these mechanics happen. So I figured out pretty early that in order for this to happen really like well, um, I have to create actual game objects that behave like anchor points in the individual facilities themselves. Hmm. Okay, so now I'm just messing around with individual game objects. I've created now a focus POV. That was basically a focus point of view. So if you ever click on the facility while you're in the internal view, it'll center to that and focus on it. It just acts as like a predetermined camera point as well, which is nice. Okay, so now I'm just again realizing that messing around with its scale is a little bit annoying, but yeah, I'll slowly figure this out towards the end anyway. Let me just look like a complete twat while I do this. Of course, in the end, I realized it would just be easier if I just scaled up the ship, because actually my ship scale was really weird. My ship scale was not at a proper scale. So I scaled up the ship, and it seemed to get it right where I wanted it to be. So that was fun. All right. What's next on the agenda? What am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? Oh yeah, no, I'm just trying to figure out how the elevator works. So the elevator is going to be different from from all the other facilities, because instead of it just having sides from the left and the right, it also needs sides on the top and the bottom. Again with the scaling. This is probably just me and my OCD. I want everything to be perfect, so I constantly scale things. But I believe that's the last time I do that. Anyway, what's next? Ah, yes, I just need. So this is what I'm doing. I've told the each ship that it has an owning player. This will come, I think, important when it becomes to multiplayer, because you know, you don't want other players controlling your ship. And it'll also make a link between the player and the ship via the ship scripts, which will be quite essential. Okay, let's create a list there of facilities. And what else? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. So if there's no internal oh God, I remember this. Yeah, no, this was me. I realized that I was end up gonna just make a mistake here anyway. This was me trying to code that if there's no internal camera, it should spawn a new one. And I never figured that out. I never was able to figure out why it wasn't working, but eventually I was just like, fuck it, I'll leave it. The joys of coding. Okay, what am I doing now? Internal camera controls. Oh joy. Okay, so this is me programming how the internal camera will operate. A lot of math and a lot of copying and then overriding. But it worked out really well. So what I'm just saying here is that if IVA is active, if internal view is active, then the main camera will turn off, but the internal camera will turn on, giving the game engine something to look from. And this is just me testing whether the camera follows the ship when it moves and all that kind of jazz. Standard stuff, if you want to call any of this standard. Oh boy. All right. What else? What is next on the agenda? Just messing around with some things. Assigning some game objects. All right. If input dot get key down. I believe I'm trying to do the mouse thing here. Not sure what happened there. Good old-fashioned copying and pasting. Oh yes, get mouse button down number 1. That is if I click the left-hand mouse button, I think. Okay, so again, copy and paste. Because I mean, I've already made this code. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Just changing 1 or 2 things to accommodate the internal camera instead of the external one. So this is just telling the camera to move left and right depending on the horizontal axis, and this is there again, but up and down based on the v-axis. And although I mess around with it, I realize that some of them are inverted and some of them are not, so I just mess around a little bit more until I get it just right. And now it's time to make sensitivity a thing, because camera sensitivity is, well, it's handy. I realized that the camera sensitivity here, I think, is a bit too high. Oh look, I've changed. Oh yeah, I've set a maximum horizontal and vertical. This is so that the camera doesn't constantly scroll too far to the left and to the left. You're not to the right and to the left and up and down, so that you know just go beyond the ship. So now you can see it's working fine. It's time to program the zoom, because you should be able to zoom out, but not too far. So the next thing I'll do is code the zoom. If I would get off my phone, look at this motherfucker, this lazy person. Wasting so much time. Anyway, all right. This is forward and back. Times time, and I'm going to clamp it soon. Let's see, how do I clamp it? Get a vector, create a new vector from that, clamp that vector with a mathf.clamp, and then say that its vector is equal to the new one, because that's how you do it. Apparently, there's no modifying its vector directly. You have to copy it. You have to augment the copy, and then you have to override it, which is really annoying. It's it's extra steps, man, that are not necessary in my opinion. But hey, I didn't build Unity, so if the engineers think that this is the most efficient way of doing it, then I guess that's what I have to do. So now I'm just copying and pasting, editing and overing for each one of the axes, the right and left, the up and down, backward and forward. Then I realized I'm going to swap those two around, that -1 and negative cam zoom, because technically while zooming in and out, I'm actually at the negative axis. I'm in the negatives, not in the positive. So the largest number is actually the most negative, or something like that. No, the largest number is the closest to 0. But yeah, it seems like I've figured that out. So back to UI development. All of this, by the way, is leading up to the mechanic that is the internal construction mechanic. This is all preparation work. Step by step getting there. What else? What am I going to do next? I'm just sitting here doing nothing. Oh yeah, so I accidentally turned off the camera, the canvas outline. I was like, what? Look at all those those quiet assets there. I mean, you can totally tell where my influences were for this game. But I will happily say that my influences for this game were games like EVE Online, Fallout Shelter, and Pokemon Go. But that last one will be coming in later videos. Alright. Time to code some internal view heads-up displays. Just making some shortcuts here. And deleting some redundant code. Alright, in the update, or wherever the hell I go. Okay, so Oh yeah, that's just to make sure that that primary button down the right sends me back to the outside view. Okay. This is just telling the computer that under a certain thing, make this UI the one that is active. What else? Construction button. So, got a song stuck in my head. Oh yeah, that's right. Realized that the camera wasn't moving with the ship all the way. We just get stuck at certain points. So I had to say, listen, you're stuck to its local coordinates. All right, so this is just me making some more fine tuning to my code. I got obviously pissed off with that and deleted it. I'll come back to it later. This is me making a reference to something called the UIM, which is short for User Interface Manager. Just linking it there and start. It's effectively a shortcut, so I don't have to type out that whole string, that whole line every time I need it. So the construction menu, oh, the next big step in getting closer to that mechanic. So the construction menu is a heads-up display, or at least a user interface element that first finds out all the facilities that you as a player have unlocked to build in your ship, and then lists them in a horizontal menu. So this is me attempting to do that for the first time. It didn't really work out the first time because I had kind of forgotten how I did the first in the previous project. But you'll notice that in the future I actually go back to that old project to figure out what the hell I did and how I accomplished it. And then I mess around with it a couple of times, and then I get it right eventually. But for the time being, just enjoy me making a ton of mistakes. Being a normal coder, making mistakes because I'm human. But I actually kind of get it right, like to a degree, on a scripting level. Okay, so time to make that button. Now what I've done is I've created a new UI element, this giant white panel that you see me building here. This is going to be a card, like a game card, like you would find in card, like trading card basically. And a card will display, it'll hold a game object in its code, and it'll display information associated to that game object. In this case, these cards will be told to hold a game object that is relevant to the facilities available. So each card will hold a facility in its code, and then it'll augment its appearance based on the information of that facility. So it'll have a picture of the facility's thumbnail. Its name on the card will be the facility's name, and any additional information that comes with the facility will be displayed on that card. And this will work for all other stuff as well, like different ships, objects, items, all that kind of jazz. So that players have this kind of, this nice little bit of UI to work with and understand what's going on. Like a trading card for each game object in the game, so that, it feels a little bit more informative or user-friendly that way. I don't know. This is how I want it, so I'm going to keep it like this. This next part is really simple and can actually be done in Start, but for the idea of clean code, I'm just going to keep it in. I'm going to create a method just for it. So what I've said here is for each game object in PSAC or whatever it's called, which is short for Player Ship Achievements, or no, Player Script Achievements. There is an array that I've created called facilities, and for each entry in the facilities, I want you to spawn a card and then tell that card that the game object attached to it is the entry. Um, I don't know if you kind of kept up with what I just explained, because even I just kind of confused myself a little bit there. But effectively, what I've said is spawn a card for each entry in that list, and for every entry in that list, make that card remember that entry, remember that game object. In this case, remember that facility. And so yeah. Look, I've started on my computer. This is me going into my old. So this is the old file. This is the original version that I made. And I do refer to it a lot because I built this. I built the first version in Unity. I built the first version in university, but it's very slapstick, very rushed, not elegant, not efficient. It's just horrible. But there are certain things that I did there that I needed reminding on how to do it again. So here we go. I've deleted my old panel and I've created something called a viewport, which is a special UI element that is meant for keeping track of lists and keeping track of inventories and items. It's a scroll bar, basically. A visual scroll bar, if that's what you want to call it. So yeah, there we go. As you can see, it's creating a card for each item in that facilities array, which right now I think is about 6. I'll go back to it at some point and you'll see what I'm talking about. Me getting frustrated because I'm not sure how to do everything, so I'm just constantly going back to that previous version of my game. A lot of back and forth in this time period, but I eventually get it right. I've been listening to a song called Kokomo, and now it's stuck in my head. So if you hear me sing it from occasionally or just hum it, just ignore me. My friend kind of introduced me to it, and it's an old song. I love it, but that's because he's watched a TV series that I've watched called Space Force. Which, by the way, if you have Netflix, go watch Space Force. Absolutely amazing. Stephen Carell is amazing in it, and it's yeah, the songs from there. And now I've got it stuck in my head. So here I am just messing around with trying to get this stupid viewport and its content thing to work, because there's ActiveScript making it all elasticated and not allowing me to mess around with the size and stuff like that. Eventually it starts to bend to my will, but it takes a bit of tweaking. All right, what else? I believe I've just begun to finish that. Yes, finish it. I think I'm just messing around with components now to make this more efficient. Yeah, making sure it doesn't scroll too far over and stuff like that. Yeah. It doesn't do anything. There we go. Got it right. Me messing around, seeing if it just does some more things, and just fine-tuning its transform here a little bit. It's rect transform, which is the transform for UI elements. And there we go. It's showing a card for every entry in that array, which once I've done all the facilities, I'll put them on there, and it'll spawn a card for each one of those. Okay, so now we're looking at the facility manager, and this is going to be the script that controls the facilities, manages them, and controls the construction. So here I am coding that card that I spoke about earlier that holds game objects. So first thing I've done is I've told it, listen, you've got a game object attached to you called my facility. And then you've got a facility script called fs, and I've said here in start that fs is equal to that long line of code just to make a shortcut, so I don't have to constantly type that whole string out, that whole line of text. and just attaching those game objects there, like the text and the image, and I said, right, the name is equal to myFacility.fs, get it script, or not. Okay, that didn't work. Nope. There we go. Name.text is equal to facility.name, and thumbnail is equal to, what else? Thumbnail is equal to, come on, mate. Oh yeah, I needed to add that there. Thumbnail is equal to thumbnail. Or at least it's equal to the facility script thumbnail. Now when we create a facility, I'll just add a thumbnail there for convenience sake. Alright, so here I've said when you create a new card, I want you to get that card's card information, get its my facility game object, and equal that to the entry in that list that you're currently looking at. And it would seem that that has worked. I know you guys probably can't actually see what I'm seeing. If you try and pause the video, you'll see the changes I'm referring to when I test the game out. Yeah, so just pause every now and then if you want to be like, oh, I see what he means, like when he says this and that. All right, so here we go. Just wow, not sure what that was. Here's the cancel button, what it does, and that just takes you back to the main heads-up display of the internal view. This is me attempting to add a listener, but this wouldn't work because adding a listener for each entry in the game object, for each entry in a for each loop like this, I don't think is possible. And I kind of struggled with this while I was programming this to wrap my head around the fact that that's not going to happen because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew what I was doing at this point was not going to work, but I wasn't really sure, so I did it anyway to see if it would. But then I realized, nah, keep it. Let's rather just keep that mechanic in the card itself. So now the card has two scripts attached to it. It's got a card information. This will change what its appearance is. And it's got a construction card script attached to it that does this stuff. Now here I'm adding a listener, and listeners can't do direct method. They can't do direct. They can't follow instructions directly. You have to make a method with the instructions in them. So that's what I had to do there. So now I've made a method in that card construction card script that says like, right, when I touch you, this is what you meant to do. Oh look, my camera's back on again. Because all these cards aren't just images, by the way, they're buttons, they're UI buttons, which well, you know, it means that when you tap on them, something will happen. So this is me building the mechanic for that whole search every facility and get all its sides. So right now what I'm doing is I'm creating a for each loop for each facilities that are tracked in the facility manager, which is separate from the facilities unlocked in the achievements script, which is where all those cards come from. And I said, right, for each facility, get that facility, and for each one of its sides, I want you to spawn, or in this case, what it's called instantiate, a constructor, which is a game object that is purely there as a reference point and as an interactional build, like our game object for players, so that when they want to build a new room, they just need to click on that, and that's how it'll happen. So I'm just messing around with some inherency here because the facility script is what's going to affect all the facilities, but now I'm just coding the CIC itself. Keep that into its own method instead of just throwing it up in update. Set new facility. spawn constructors, and then what else? Destroy constructors. Yeah, that's right. When you click on a constructor and you build a new room, the constructors are going to stay there unless you destroy them. So I have to now create a method that destroys all the constructors. Now, I remember at this point that I completely forgot how to do this. So again, you'll find me referencing my old game project in a previous version of Unity to figure out how I did this. So I keep on going through this like once or twice before I realize, okay, it's time to just accept the fact that I can't remember. So it's time that I go into a previous build in Unity. So I do that. I look at my previous build, or at least I Google it first, like most developers do, but then I get upset and get hutful and go like, right, how did I do this in the previous game? And there we go. Well, no, here we go. Well, that's the code. So copy and paste, copy and paste old work, and boom, it works just fine. Time to add that tag though. There we go, there's the constructor, that's what it looks like, just sizing it up, making it look appropriate, and, you know, equal in size and all that jazz. Constructor prefab, save it in the game files, and there we go. So now whenever you click the construction button, the constructors will spawn. Now what else? What else is left? What else can I do? So this is just checking if the player is inside the ship and the new facility is not empty. And then do the following, send out a raycast. So if the new facility game object is empty, that's kind of like that plays a bit like a Boolean true or false statement. If it's empty, none of this works. If it's full, it means that the construction phase has begun, has started, and it'll you know, it helps the rest of this mechanic kind of figure out where it's going and makes everything else kind of do what it needs to. All right. If a laser beam is shot from the point where you click on the screen from the internal camera and it hits a constructor, new facility equals null, and it needs to spawn the new facility where the constructor used to be. This is just me making sure that the start method is inherited into the new game object. Setting up those colliders. Telling them that if a constructor collides with a facility, it must delete itself. This is so that constructors don't overlap facilities when they exist in the world. Because otherwise you'll have constructors spawning in the middle of a facility, and it just doesn't work. Well, it's just wrong. So, yeah, there we go. There's me leaving a little comment. I think I like this medium of muting my original videos, speeding them up to 1,000 of speed, and just narrating over it while I'm editing. So there we go. As you can see, the construction mechanic is working nicely now. I start to mess around with this as much as I can. I gotta set some limits on those buildings there so that they don't spawn or build outside of the ship. But yeah, as far as that is concerned, that now all works out just well. Just some final tweaks, some moving around of code and mechanics. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. If you are liking what you're seeing and you want to support my endeavors, go to my GoFundMe and help. Thank you. And yeah, have a good day.